Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Thanks for tuning in for another episode. Today I want to get back to our retrieve series. I've had a lot of people ask me specifically about how I fish an underspin. It is a cold water bait for me. You can use it year round, but it really shines during the coldest period of the year. It's November here in Wisconsin, so an underspin is definitely one that I'm going to be using. I just got done doing a video on this little guy right here. This is a Raid Japan guy called the Libero. It's a phenomenal little underspin. I'm very impressed with it. But I want to do some retrieves with you. I want to show you how I'm using underspins to catch a bunch of fish. Now, it's one of those baits that you can overwork, in my opinion. Generally speaking, you want to let the bait draw the fish's attention. You don't need to impart that much action with the rod tip. So I'm going to walk you through the 3 or 4 different retrieves that I like to use. Not saying that these are the only ways to fish it, but these are ways that have been productive for me over the years. And if you've got some other ones that you want to share in the comment section, feel free to share it, because I want everyone who's watching this to learn from both myself as well as you guys out there. But let me get on the water here and show you the 4 different retrieves that I like to use with an underspin. All right, so my favorite retrieve, and probably how I fish an underspin the majority of the time, is to sit on a break line or in a ditch, and I'm gonna actually just tight line my bait. So I throw it out there, engage the reel, and I'm just basically holding it and slowly picking up line once in a while, but I'm letting my bait pendulum down a break line. So in this case, I've got a break line, the boat is sitting right on it, and I'm just letting that bait just swing nicely. I'm letting the tail just go based on the speed of the fall, and that blade is slowly moving. It's a great presentation if you're fishing down a break line, or maybe you've got a ditch and you know the fish are sitting in the middle of the ditch. It also works really well if you've got standing timber or objects out deeper and you just want your bait to slowly fall right by it. But a pendulum retrieve or tight line retrieve is probably, in my opinion, the #1 retrieve to throw with an underspin. And once you get it down to the depth you want, you kind of pick up a little bit of line, let it swing a little bit more. Pick up a little bit of line, let it swing a little bit more. I don't do much with my rod tip to try to impart any action into that bait. It's more about just letting that bait slowly fall through the water column. When it does that, the tail is slowly kicking, the blade is slowly spinning. It presents a undeniable meal for a hungry fish. All right, so the second retrieve is a little bit more unusual. It's where I sit on top of the structure. So in this case, you can see the bottom there. We're probably in 4 foot of water. We're on a point that runs around here, and I'm gonna fire down the point. So I'm casting into about 20 foot of water, and I'm gonna bring that bait uphill. Now, I'm gonna fish this not necessarily like most people would fish an underspin. I'm gonna fish this more like a jig. And what I'm looking for is to keep bottom contact where you've got my bait, which looks like a bait fish, swimming uphill, and then the blade kind of just clinking off the bottom, maybe flashing once in a while, but it's a real slow retrieve just uphill, just like you'd be dragging a football jig. You want to maintain bottom contact, and you want those fish to really feel like there's just a bait fish, an easy meal going up the bottom. At the same time, I think a lot of times fish think that this is actually a crayfish too. But it's a really slow retrieve. You fish it just like you'd be fishing a jig. Maybe you stop it once in a while, but it's very untraditional for an underspin. But I tell you what, it works really well, especially if you're on fisheries where you've got a lot of fish feeding on bottom forage. Maybe that's gobies, maybe that's sculpin, maybe it's crayfish even. The point here is if the fish are tight to the bottom, your bait needs to be tight to the bottom, and that'll then get the fish to commit to it versus having to get them to come off the bottom, which under like high pressure days, they probably won't do. So that's a second way I like to do it. So my third favorite retrieve is to work the bait down a break line. So from shallow to deep. So right now I cast into probably 7-8 foot, boat sitting in about 20. I let it fall to the bottom. So it's on the bottom, and then I just keep my rod tip pointed up, reel about, I don't know, 2-3 reel handles, and then kill it. And then I'm just letting it fall back to the bottom. And really what I'm doing is I'm creating that stair step effect as my bait goes down the break line. It's a great way to keep your bait in the strike zone, and most of the time, most of your bites will come right after you stop reeling. They'll tap it right there as the bait falls because they think it's starting to change pace up on them. But it's a really good way to allow you to fish the entire water column and keep your bait closer to the bottom. Now, you don't have to do this where you're hitting the bottom every time. Now, in that cast, I was fishing it where I'd let it hit the bottom and stop it. If I feel like the fish are holding a little bit higher up in the water column, say they're in 10 feet over 20, I can do the same thing. I'll just reel it, stop it, reel it, stop it, and I'm trying to keep my bait, say, in 8 foot of water if I think the fish are in 10. The key here is it's that stop and go retrieve that generally produces a lot of your bites. And again, I want you to recall, a lot of the time you're fishing this bait in colder water periods. That's really when it thrives. You can fish it year round, but in colder water periods, that's when the bait is going to be at its best. And when that's the case, the fish aren't super aggressive. So you don't need to be doing anything crazy. A nice steady retrieve of stop and goes is one that is really good at generating those lethargic fish that either don't want to come off the bottom or are just not willing to come from 50 feet away to eat your bait. They're really just saying, hey, I'm coming for it. And then you stop it, and then you basically stop it right in front of their face, and they can't deny it at that point. But if you were to burn it through there, a lot of those fish aren't aggressive enough to come up. All right, the fourth retrieve style is to fire it out. This is generally better for flats, and I'm just gonna slowly, steady retrieve it. And I'm gonna shake my rod tip a little bit off and on. So I'm steady retrieving, rod tip pointed up. I'm trying to keep the bait suspended. And every once in a while, I'm gonna give it a shake. So it's not gonna be just a consistent retrieve, but it's gonna be a consistent retrieve with a little bit of shakes once in a while. You just want that bait to do a little shimmy, almost like it's a dying bait fish, and then it picks up its retrieve again. That's a really good retrieve style if you've got fish that are up on a flat. It's really good in the springtime too. So, you know, when you've got a lot of fish that are just kind of up roaming around, it's a really good way to present it to them. But you want to keep your rod tip up. You want to keep it, you know, pointed to the sky, and you just steady retrieve the whole way, almost like you're fishing a swim bait. You know, if you want, you can stop it and kill it a little bit. But that little shake of the rod tip is one thing that seems to generate a lot of strikes. I don't know why that tiny little movement is it, but it's like you break up the monotonous of that bait just swimming at a consistent pace, and you put that shimmy in, and it's almost like the fish has a little bit of like a seizure, and it creates that easy meal for a bass, and they can't resist it. So those are my 4 favorite ways to do it. Yes, you can just straight retrieve a underspin if you want, but I'm telling you, if you impart some of these other forms of action into it, you'll generate more strikes. And it is an absolute phenomenal bait. It is one that should probably be in your arsenal. And I'm telling you, if you work in some of these different retrieve styles, you'll see it how much more versatile an underspin can be. Hopefully you enjoyed today's video. If you did, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. Stay tuned, new video coming out tomorrow.